On Hulu, I watched the recently added documentary Turtle Power, the definitive history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it's a bit biased, propaganda, has some omissions. So production value is okay. I guess you get a few live action bits, no actual actors, but they have a little recreation of the ooze canister falling into the sewer. You got your story of the Ninja Turtles. You got to go into this having understood who the Ninja Turtles are. And I think the concept here is that most people know, so that stuff's not touched upon so much. Now, this is the history of how the comic book was created, that led to the toy line and the cartoon and the initial run of the movies. So that's your story here. We got the Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird, how they met. One of them had a zine, a little indie newsletter called Scat, and it was about independent artists, kind of comic stuff in New York City. And just one day, one of these was left on the ground in the subway, and the other guy, can't remember if I think it's Eastman, picks it up. And he's like, hey, maybe I could contribute to this. And these guys kind of hit it off. And then one night they're kind of joking around, say, hey, here's a picture of a turtle. He's a ninja. Oh, well, he can be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. And then they start going back and forth drawing these turtles. And they're like, we have to do something about this. And they run their little first print TMNT issue, black and white. I think this was stuff done on a copier. This is very indie. There's a lot of facsimiles of that first issue. I have a bug on my glasses. And so if you actually have one of the authentic first prints, it's worth some pretty serious dough, especially in good condition. And then they're like, this is kind of a hit. We're making $2,000 a month. Hooray. Let's hire on some more artists to help us out. Expand this. This isn't just going to be a one run kind of deal. We're going to have multiple issues. Let's make this a series. Even though they mentioned they kill Shredder in the first one. I didn't know that. So they expand upon this, and before you know it, they're getting contacted by this licensing guy, and he's like, hey, we can have toys and a cartoon, and the cartoon sells the toys, and that's where Bebop and Rocksteady come into the picture. You get to meet the people who do the voices on the first cartoon. James Avery's alive during this. This was in 2014. And then they talk about the movies and Jim Henson making the puppetry. And most of the talk on the movies is about the puppet work. The animatronic, how they got all that stuff to work. Because, that's what people watching this are fascinated about. And that's pretty much it. Then they talk about selling the company in 2009. What do they not mention? Well, okay, yeah, they do mention the video games briefly. But they don't mention the 2003 series. They don't mention the way that the Turtles were in a downturn come mid-90s. The fad was over. They don't mention this. Why? Well, because it's being built up by Paramount. Hell, in 2012, they had a new cartoon. They could have mentioned that. But there's nothing here about the Turtles making a comeback. They'll talk about how they had a music tour and how that was a big success. Michael Ian Black actually played one of the Turtles during a promo event, got into a suit, and you had jam on a rooftop kind of stuff. And they talked to fans. But when you talk to fans in a documentary, I would like it to be fans who've done something, applied themselves in a manner that they were inspired. Not just this crazy chick who collects turtle heads from the third movie. Why her? Why Why couldn't they have just talked to people who have an indie comic right now and they say they were inspired by TMNT? You know, talk to like the Walking Dead people. Surely they can say something about it, right? I don't get that. They don't mention the 2014 movie, and this is done as a tie-in. Like, this is released right before, you know, build up some hype for that 2014 movie. And you're thinking, okay, well, surely they'd give you an inside look at that. But there is some gloom and doom with the Turtles, and they just wash over it completely. This isn't a sustained high. You know, they said in the toy line, we might get 3 years out of this. Okay, you did better than that. You got at least 5. But, you know, there was definitely a time where the Turtles were not cool. Late 90s, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, nowhere to be seen. No one was talking about that stuff. It was so on the way out, I can't even describe it in words. If you're my age or close, you know that there were times where the Turtles were not the thing. You know, they get resurrected in 2003, and even then it's not that kind of big, you know, initial Beatles of the cartoon world kind of thing. It's not anything anybody really paid too much attention to. And maybe that's because of this, they're like, you know, let's not even bother mention that. Let's not mention the failures. Not to say 2003 cartoon's a failure, it lasted a while. But, you know, it's not the thing that everybody knows about it. You know, you're doing a documentary on Michael Jackson. You're going to talk about Thriller. You're going to talk about history. Or is it his story, however you pronounce that? Probably not. But there's nothing definitive about this. You know, being that this is from Paramount, that this had their hand up in it, working that puppet, that PR puppet propaganda. You know, I feel like I can give this a star rating, and it comes up short on what it says it is, even though you do learn a little bit. So I give Turtle Power to the definitive history. I have to kick myself for saying definitive here. Of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2.5 out of 4 stars.